Order. Sir Mark Hendrick to move the motion.
I beg to move that this House has considered cybersecurity laws and tackling crime. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Ms Bardell. I'm delighted to lead this Westminster Hall debate on the important issue of cybersecurity, particularly in relation to cybercrime and the need to enhance the UK's national cyber resiliency. Cybersecurity has a significant impact on society, the economy and individuals, as well as both national and global security. The UK faces cyber threats from a number of hostile actors, whether it's state and state-sponsored groups or criminal organisations motivated by money. Cybercrime itself ranges anywhere from complex ransomware attacks to less sophisticated cyber threats like hacking and phishing, which many individuals face in their everyday lives. In today's world, virtually every business, charity and public sector organisation is in some way digital, but as high-profile incidents have shown, cyber attacks exploiting this digitalisation can quickly undermine trust in our private and our public sector institutions. With a burgeoning cyber ecosystem, the UK is well placed to be a global leader on cybersecurity, a point I will come back to later in my speech. But often we will struggle to get the basics right, leaving citizens and businesses exposed as they move more and more of their lives and operations online. Last year, UK businesses experienced approximately 7.78 million cybercrimes. Half of businesses, 50%, and around a third of charities, 32%, report having experienced some form of cyber breach or attack in the last 12 months. These attacks have had a real impact on business and consumers. A recent report by the think tank RUSI brought to light some of the stark implications of cybercrime, particularly in relation to ransomware, which is malware designed to deny a user or organisation access to their own data unless a ransom is paid to the attacker. Now, RUSI's report revealed the extent in which ransomware can ruin lives, with harm going beyond financial and reputational costs for organisations. Victims and incident responders have revealed that ransomware creates both physical and psychological harms for individuals and groups, which have caused individuals to lose their jobs, evoked feelings of shame and self-blame, have seeped into private and family life, and have contributed to serious health issues. Further, and I quote from the report directly, the harm and cumulative effects caused by ransomware attacks have implications for wider society and national security, including supply chain disruption, a loss of trust in law enforcement, reduced faith in public services, and the normalisation of cybercrime. Ransomware also creates a strategic advantage for the hostile states harbouring the cyber criminals who conduct such operations. Meanwhile, the threat landscape is changing and becoming more complex. UK cyber firm NCC Group's latest insights show that ransomware attacks increased by 84% last year, with the UK the second most targeted country for such attacks, behind only the US. Emerging technologies like artificial intelligence have the potential to enable cyber attackers to mount ever more sophisticated campaigns against organisations. AI is effectively lowering the barrier of entry into cybercrime, making it easier for cyber attackers to successfully target victims and widening the availability of voice cloning, deep fakes and social engineering bots. We are likely to see this manifest in a higher volume of cyber attacks, an enhanced ability of cyber criminals to generate malware, and an improved success rate of social engineering and phishing attacks. With AI as an emerging threat, hacking as a service is being thought of as a growing market, whereby malware developers sell or lease cyber attack tools and services to other cyber criminals. Worryingly, this business model extends cyber attack capabilities to organisations and individuals who would not otherwise have known how to carry out attacks themselves. Artificial intelligence is also advancing tactics that have been around for decades and, in its own way, evolving threats in line with technology. Deepfake phishing is just one example of a fast-growing threat that manipulates or confuses users in order to exploit their trust and gain access to their data. This can be done through emails or messages, video calls and voice messages, where personalisation of messages and synthetic content can make the attack more credible. Cyber threats should be seen in the wider context of nation-state threats too. The conflict in Ukraine has shown how cyber and kinetic attacks are increasingly interconnected in modern hybrid warfare. As thousands of lines of complex code control new and evolving physical functions and systems, such as in smart cities, cybersecurity vulnerabilities can be exploited to affect change in the real world. Whilst we have not seen the so-called Cybergeddon that some were expecting from the next big conflict on our globe, one thing is clear. Cyber warfare has proven itself to be a critical element in hybrid cyber-kinetic battlefield. Now, there is an opportunity here for the UK. To tackle cybercrime, a close partnership between the public and private sector is a critical part of the UK's whole society approach. In particular, the UK's cyber industry is working closely with law enforcement, the public sector, academia, and other private firms to ensure the UK remains confident, capable, and resilient in this fast-moving digital world. This includes vulnerability researchers, also known as ethical hackers, who identify security vulnerabilities in products, software, and the UK government. They rely on these researchers to identify bugs before they can be exploited by malicious actors for their nefarious purposes. Meanwhile, threat intelligence researchers detect cyber attacks and gain insight into attackers and victims. Researchers then work with and pass on this important information to law enforcement and intelligence agencies, enabling them to defend the UK against rising cybercrime and geopolitical threat actors. Many of the recent takedown operations we've heard about, where law enforcement disrupts the servers or digital infrastructure cyber criminals used to conduct their illegal activities, were possible only because intelligence and insights about those cyber criminals were shared across the public and private sectors. Now, I firmly believe there is an opportunity for the UK to play a significant leadership role in conducting the UK's response, with the North West Cyber Corridor at its heart. We're already seeing this public-private partnership in action in wider Lancashire and in my own constituency of Preston. The National Cyber Force, which will be opening its new home in Salisbury, Lancashire in 2025, it is a partnership between defence and intelligence and currently carries out cyber operations daily to counter and contest those who will do harm to the UK or our allies, to keep the country safe and to protect and promote the UK's interests at home and abroad. Meanwhile, the Lancashire Cyber Partnership, LCP, which is a strategic collaboration between Lancashire County Council, the Lancashire Enterprise Partnership, the University of Central Lancashire, Lancaster University and BAE Systems. In addition, the National Cyber Force has its own role in shaping, supporting and promoting the county's world-class cyber strengths and fast-growing cyber ecosystem, becoming a destination for cyber businesses, investors, careers, training, academia and indeed innovation. With a strong cyber industry, Lancashire and the wider North West are fostering the growth of the technology, digital and defence sector and harnessing the investment, jobs and benefits that come with a thriving cyber economy. We should be proud of the UK's role as a responsible global cyber power. We should also remember that there is widespread cross-party and cross-societal consensus on the importance of cybersecurity as a fundamental pillar for thriving and prosperous digital societies and economies. But we cannot be complacent. Research from the NCC Group has shown that citizens, our constituents, expect us, as political decision makers, to do what we can to keep them safe and secure in cyberspace. We have strong foundations to build on. We must continue to do more to take our cybersecurity to the next level. Indeed, much more can be done to ensure regional cyber clusters like the North West can play their part in making us all safer online, while also enhancing national cyber resilience. Now, Ms. Bowdell, I'd like to move on to the issue of the Computer Misuse Act. First and foremost, the UK's Computer Misuse Act 1990, which is the main cybersecurity act that regulates the UK's digital relationship between individuals and malicious parties, needs bringing into the 21st century. The Act was written over 30 years ago when just 0.5% of the world's population had access to the internet, or before the cyber industry as we know it today even existed. And as a result, the UK's cyber defenders, like the vulnerability and threat intelligence researchers mentioned earlier, are held back by this outdated law from doing all they can to protect the UK. This is because the Act, which I said was written over 30 years ago, blanketly prohibits all forms of unauthorised access to computer material, irrespective of intent or motive. In the current day and age where an individual desktop PC is but a distant memory, where technologies are hyper-connected and where cybercrime is rampant, this approach simply does not reflect the reality we live in. The legislation is no longer fit for purpose, and worse, it actually might be detrimental. There have been calls from industry, led by the Cyber Up campaign, to reform the law and to include a defence for legitimate cybersecurity work. Sir Patrick Vallance called for such a defence in his report on the pro-innovation regulation of technologies. And in his report, he recommended amending the Computer Misuse Act 1990 to include a statutory public interest defence that would provide stronger legal protections for cybersecurity researchers and professionals, and would have a catalytic effect on the innovation in a sector where considerable growth potential is available. Countries such as France, Israel, and the United States have already updated their regulations to provide this defence. I would like to join Sir Patrick in agreeing that for the first UK cyber industry to compete on a level playing field, the UK government should do the same. However, we are now 1 year on since Sir Patrick published his recommendation, and 3 years after the UK government first launched its review into the Computer Misuse Act. And the government is yet to set out how it will address the legal barriers the Act presents to the UK cybersecurity industry. A second area where the government must prioritise reform is in updating the Network and Information Systems regulations, which set out the cyber rules for our critical infrastructure. Back in 2022, the government announced its intentions to legislate to enable new sectors to be brought within the scope of the NIS regulations, responding to the inevitable evolution of what constitutes the UK's critical infrastructure. But these reforms were not included in the most recent King's speech. It is critical that there are no further delays in bringing forward these reforms and that the bill is prioritised. Failure to legislate would leave a core part of the UK's critical infrastructure exposed, where others globally are already moving forward with new laws to ensure all relevant entities are appropriately and proportionately regulated. And outside of the UK's critical infrastructure, we must also look to how we protect our small businesses and charities, which are the backbone of the UK's economy. Despite 6 in 10 small businesses being victims of a cyber attack last year, many lack the skills and budgets to implement proportionate cyber protections, leaving them exposed. They can also be disproportionately affected, with cyber attacks sometimes posing an existential threat. A survey found that 90% of European SMEs believe that cybersecurity issues would have serious negative impacts on their business within a week of issues happening, with 57% saying they would most likely become bankrupt or go out of business. It is unrealistic to expect small firms to adhere to and invest in the same cyber resilience standards as larger firms like critical infrastructure. However, this leaves a significant part of the economy vulnerable to cyber attacks. To tackle this problem, the government should work with technology providers to embed cybersecurity into their products, particularly those most relied upon by small organisations. The government should also look at how it can support smaller firms' response and recovery to cyber attacks. This could include establishing a first responder service that provides proportionate, i.e. free at the point of use, support to small businesses that have been victims of cyber attacks. This could include incident response services and the triaging of further steps, such as where victims could get the most effective help. Such a scheme could learn lessons from our counterparts in Australia, who recently announced a small business cybersecurity resilience service. Finally, the government must look at how it enhances the UK's cyber skills. Cyber skills isn't just about addressing the cyber industry's significant skills shortage, although it is a critical part of it. It is also about equipping individuals across organisations of all sizes and at all levels of seniority with cyber literacy that they need to make decisions about their personal, organisational and even national cyber resilience. A national programme of cyber literacy is needed, ensuring that everyone, from preschoolers right through to pensioners, is cyber literate, no matter where they are on their learning, career or retirement journeys. This could include commissioning, as I put it, cyber BBs, keeping with the concept of CBBS, to help preschoolers learn while they play fun games, watch clips, sing songs and make things. Start cyber education and awareness in the earliest years. We could also look at including cyber competence, covering safe and secure online behaviours, privacy, and the use of technology alongside broader technology and computing lessons as a mandatory part of the school curriculum. This should be reviewed and tested with an industry advisory board on a regular basis to ensure it keeps pace with technological developments and industry requirements. Teachers must also be regularly supported to understand new developments and how they should be reflected in the school curriculum. STEM programmes throughout the country have had a critical role in creating opportunities for today's youth as they advance their education and skill set. In my own constituency of Preston, I'm very proud of the work of Cardinal Newman College, one of the highest performing sixth form colleges nationally, which has partnered with Lancaster University to harness the skills of young people with a passion and aptitude for the study of maths and science. In doing so, they have further developed their interest and education while providing them with the opportunities for their future, including especially in the field of cyber at the new Cyber Defence Centre. I would like to ask 4 questions for the Minister, who is about to take his place in the hall. Will the Minister, and welcome, will the Minister join me in praising and expressing pride in our UK cyber industry? Will he acknowledge, like we all do, the role our industry plays in keeping us all safe and secure in cyberspace? Will the Minister set out the Government's further ambitions to take our cyber security to the next level and beyond what has been announced as part of the National Cyber Strategy? And when will the Minister in particular provide more information on the government's plans to finally make progress on introducing legal protections for legitimate cybersecurity activities as part of ongoing efforts to reform the Computer Misuse Act. The government's views on following the Australian example and introduce a cyber first responder service for all our small businesses and charities, and the government's ongoing commitment to invest in our national cyber resilience. I thank the Minister for engaging with me on this important issue. It's good that there is a cross-party consensus on a matter of such importance, but it's clear that much more needs to be done when it comes to cybercrime and ensuring that government policy keeps pace with technology and the ever-changing cyber landscape, and that the public from an early age needs to be better educated and trained in the use of computers to add to the resilience that the country needs in order to overcome the challenges of cybercrime for the purposes of cybersecurity in this country. Thank you, Ms. Bardell.
And tackling crime. Before I call the SNP spokesperson, I do want to note that the Minister was not in his place, which is very disappointing given the importance of the issue and the effort put in by the member in charge. We have been grateful to Minister Opperman for sitting in, who is fortified with relevant information, and I'm sure he will let his colleague copy his homework so that his colleague is able to respond if the member in charge is happy with that.
Yeah.
On that basis, we will proceed. And I call SNP spokesperson Owen Thompson.
Thanks, Ms Bardell, and it is a great pleasure to serve with you in the chair. I also commend the Honourable Member for Preston on securing the debate on such an important issue today. The past few years have challenged us like no other time in recent history, but it's also served to highlight how critical digital technologies are to all our lives and to the functioning of society and the economy. Whether working or learning from home, running a business or keeping in touch with friends and family, digital technologies have underpinned and they continue to support our critical national infrastructure. It's nowadays it's sort of digital appliances and smart tech are everywhere, and it's more and more common to find the sort of lack of an internet connection or lack of a charger are becoming major issues if that becomes the case. And when we consider those attacks as outlined by the member for Preston, be they personally or on a national level, I think it's critical that we all consider the resilience that each of us have individually in how we manage to protect ourselves from those who would wish to do harm, but also collectively as we look to protect our society. As the Honourable Member has outlined, digital technologies cut across everything we do. They secure the resilient ways we use them and can't be an afterthought. Cyber resilience cannot simply be viewed as an IT issue. It is in fact the very backbone of every public service, to every business and every community. It's also a critical part of our economic and societal recovery and renewal, especially in Scotland as we embrace new technologies such as artificial intelligence, smart cities and 5G wireless networks. These can all be positives, albeit there are clearly those out there who would wish to use them to do harm. And digital technology is now in a stage where it's not simply enough to simply turn on and off and on again to fix problems that arise. Cyber resilience is key to operational resilience and business continuity, as well as our capacity to grow and flourish as we adapt to the demands of operating online. Our ability to deter, respond and to recover from national cyber attacks has to be a top priority, and we need a plan, exercise and reflect continually and collaboratively to ensure that we are prepared to withstand any such cyber threats. In Scotland, the strategic framework for our cyber resilience sets out what we need to do to make digitally secure and digitally resilient nation. It builds upon the work of Scotland's first cyber resilience strategy published in 2015 and expands on its achievements and addresses ongoing new challenges because, as the Honourable Member from Preston has outlined, the challenges are forever changing. This is an ever-changing landscape that we are dealing with. Cyber threats we face cannot be met by government alone, and we have a role to play in protecting ourselves, our families and our communities. Our Public and third sector and private sector organisations need to work together with government to minimise the harm and disruption that can result from any cyber incident. I mean, as members of Parliament, we've seen as some of our colleagues have been targeted and directly impacted by a cyber attack, what that has meant for them, but also what that means for the rest of us collectively. And thus, making the very most of technological advances, we need to use these to protect ourselves as those who wish to do harm look to exploit loopholes in the system. The recent pandemic reminded us of the importance of resilience and agility, and the Scottish Government has pledged to review the implementation of the framework regularly, monitoring indicators against the 4 outcomes and the action plans that will guide delivery. The 4 key outcomes about increasing Scotland's cyber resilience being ensuring that our citizens have access to basic and specialist learning and skills to help keep safe and secure online, working with partners in public, private and third sectors to enhance all of our cyber resilience, raising awareness of the importance of cyber resilience and how to achieve it by providing easier access to advice and support, and taking advantage of the economic opportunities resulting from greater cyber resilience. This is something that's great if you have the knowledge and understanding to be able to grasp with it, but we have to also recognise there's so many in our communities who want to be able to take advantage, and the massive benefits that taking advantage of our digital infrastructure present, who don't always know where to turn. So there's a massive job for all of us in making sure that that information is as widely available as it possibly can be. And it's also critical in this, if perhaps more than many other issues, that any work in this area is done in collaboration with other governments, because this isn't just a problem that's unique here. It's not a problem that's unique to Westminster or to Scotland or to any of the devolved assemblies or parliaments. This is an issue that affects all of us, and it's only by working together we can tackle it truly. The UK Government did publish the National Cyber Strategy in 2022, describing the UK's overarching cyber policy, and has noted that the strategy takes a whole-of-society approach, arguing that government must work in partnership with private sector organisations and cyber security professionals to improve cyber security. Between 2017 and 2021, £10.28 million was allocated by the Scottish Government and the UK Government under the UK National Cyber Security Programme to support our programme of action on cyber resilience. Now, I wholeheartedly agree with the Honourable Member for Preston. I think there is a pressing and urgent need to seriously look at the Computer Misuse Act. It's long overdue. And with that in mind, maybe I could ask the Minister what plans the Government has to look to review this Act, and when, and what steps he feels would be the most urgent in need of action, because certainly there are many. I think this is an issue that now, cyber and digital infrastructure technology, it's not something that's only there for the specialist few. This is something that's there in all of our day-to-day lives, in all of our communities, all of our families, all of our friends. So more than ever, it's critical that we take whatever steps we can as legislators to make sure that protections are in place and the information's there for everyone to be able to protect ourselves from those who would look to use it for ill ends. And on that note, I thank again the member for Preston for bringing this important debate today, and I'm sure it won't be the last we hear of it.
I call Labour Opposition Spokesperson Dan Jarvis.
Madam Chair, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. Can I say how good it is to see the Minister in his place? I'd like to begin by congratulating the Honourable Member for Preston for securing this important debate. He is a very long-standing and dedicated servant to his constituents and Lancashire more widely. Now, any compliment about Lancashire doesn't come particularly easy from my side of the Pennines, but it is certainly one that the Honourable Member for Preston entirely deserves for his very long-standing service of his constituents. Now, at the outset, I'd like to pay tribute to the men and women who serve in the National Cyber Force, soon to be based in Samlesbury, and also to those who serve across the security and intelligence services and in the cyber security sector. They fight on the digital front line, day in and day out, to detect, disrupt and deter individual and state-sponsored adversaries threatening our cybersecurity. Now, the cyber threat is constantly mutating and spreading, with the latest crime survey for England and Wales showing a staggering 29% increase in computer misuse between 2022 and 2023. Computer misuse disrupts services, obtains information illegally, and extorts individuals, meaning personal information can be published online without consent. Entire life savings can be lost due to fraud, or individuals, including children, can be blackmailed. So government needs to be increasingly ruthless in its approach to counter these threats and legislate for the challenges of today, not those of yesterday. Doing so will give cybersecurity professionals the means to retain the advantage over those who seek to harm us and protect more people and organisations from cybercrime. Therefore, and the Right Honourable Member for Midlothian rightly made this point, the Computer Misuse Act, the CMA of 1990, does need updating to reflect the challenges of the cyber age, not the CFAX age. Accelerating technological change means outdated legislation is struggling to catch up with cyber threats posed by the likes of artificial intelligence. That's why, on this side, we have already proposed to criminalise the programming of chatbots that radicalise and spread terrorist material. We also welcome the government's announcement last month to criminalise sexually explicit deepfake creation in the Criminal Justice Bill. This is because outdated legislation is also restrictive at best but punitive at worst for cybersecurity professionals in the UK who conduct ethical hacking to expose system vulnerabilities and protect us from harmful cyber attacks. The National Cybersecurity Centre, home to exceptional men and women fighting cybercrime, has said that ethical hacking reports by individual researchers provide valuable information which organisations can use to improve the security of their systems. That's why the opposition tabled an amendment to the Criminal Justice Bill to reform the CMA, introducing a statutory defence for cybersecurity researchers and professionals involved in ethical hacking. Our amendment comes after the Chancellor's commitment to implement all of Sir Patrick Valance's recommendations on the regulation of emerging digital technologies published alongside last spring's budget, which included statutory defence. So if this government doesn't deliver, the next one should. Until this happens, this legislative lag has consequences, with half of UK businesses and 32% of charities suffering a cyber breach or attack in last year alone. Breaches due to vulnerabilities in cybersecurity drive some of the most pernicious types of criminality, and according to the accounting firm BDO, fraud doubled in 2023. Furthermore, the Joint Committee on the National Security Strategy, the JCNSS, warned in December that the government could face a catastrophic ransomware attack at any moment. Well, Madam Chair, the sobering reality is that such ransomware attacks are already happening to the UK's critical national infrastructure. Just today, it was reported that in response to a ransom not being paid, personal information illegally obtained by a ransomware attack on NHS Dumfries and Galloway has been published on the dark web. A truly despicable act that accompanies another deeply concerning development today of a hack into the MOD's payroll records by a malign actor. These are only two of the most recent examples showing how the threat landscape has never been more dangerous. However, progress on reforming the CMA has been buffering for 3 years since the government first announced its review of the legislation. Despite 2 public consultations, a Home Office industry working group and several public commitments, the government hasn't yet made progress, and as the Minister will know, we're fast running out of parliamentary time. So whilst time is in short supply, there is plenty of consensus to act in the national interest and update the CMA with the opposition keen to play our part. So, when the Minister rises to his feet, I would be very grateful if he could answer the following questions, and he will know that they are in the constructive, that they are meant in the constructive spirit that we always seek to engage on these important matters. Firstly, can he give an assurance that the proposed legislation, as outlined in the government's response to the CMA consultation, will be introduced in this Parliament? Madam Chair, progress on legislation requires political leadership. However, the JCNSS's report on ransomware said that the leadership by a former Home Secretary did not treat it as a priority. The Minister will remember that I wrote to him in January about this matter and other matters identified in the JCNSS report. So, can he give a further assurance that his department and other government departments are now prioritising ransomware by confirming it will finally respond to the consultation on unauthorised access to online accounts and personal data published in September of 2022? And on the public sector payments to ransomware, the Deputy Prime Minister responded to me at Cabinet Office questions on the 25th of April, saying that it is not something that he would rule out totally. However, the Minister's written answer to me on the same question on the same day was much more resolute about the policy not to pay ransoms. I am listening to the Minister. I don't know where the Deputy Prime Minister is. That's possibly the problem. So it would be really helpful if the Minister can say whether a new approach to the public sector paying ransoms will be included or not in any update to the CMA. These assurances and clarifications matter as the Home Office is part of a cross-government response to countering cyber threats, joining DCIT, the MOD, the FCDO and the Cabinet Office in driving policy to detect, disrupt and deter cyber criminality. Now, as the Minister will know very well, the fulcrum point of such activity is the National Security Council, the NSC. But the Security Minister will also know that whilst there is a dedicated subcommittee for economic security, there isn't, I believe, a dedicated equivalent for cyber security. So could the Minister say if there's been any consideration for a dedicated subcommittee within the NSC for policy responses to intermediate and long-term cyber challenges? Another long-term challenge, and the Minister will be very familiar with this, is the retention of our best and brightest fighting cybercrime, both in the security and intelligence services and in the cyber security sector. Do our modern-day Alan Turings, playing a vital role in keeping our country safe, feel that the most innovative and effective work can happen in the UK under current cyber security legislation? The answer, sadly, is likely to be no. 60% of respondents to a recent CyberUp survey said that the CMA is a barrier to their work in threat intelligence and vulnerability research. And 16,850 cyber defenders, that's the equivalent of 2 GCHQs, are estimated to have been lost due to outdated cyber security laws. Now, the Minister knows that criminals profit the most from poor retention and recruitment. So has he considered how changes to the CMA could unlock the cybersecurity sector's huge potential to better protect our country's cyberspace? Madam Chair, this evening's debate hasn't just been about protecting our cyberspace through effective legislation. It has also been about the principle of legislation, retaining the advantage over malign actors intent on harming us. I said at the start of my speech that there are exceptional men and women working to defend our cyber security who are very much at the cutting edge of efforts to detect, disrupt and deter a myriad of threats. As legislators, providing the legal framework for this crucial work, we must now all play our part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bardell. It's a great pleasure to see you this evening, and as ever, the surprise adds only to the to the joy. It is a great pleasure to be here this evening as well, and to be speaking to the Honourable Member for Preston, who's quite right to have brought this debate, because the challenge that he's talking about and the ways in which he's addressing it are absolutely fundamental, not just to his constituents and indeed to the National Cybersecurity Force that he quite rightly pays tribute to himself and will, I hope, be hosted, or in fact he will be hosting in his constituency, but also to the very nature of us as a country. It's interesting to note that over the last 200 years, the British economy has been based on many things. It's been based on the ingenuity and brilliance of our people. It's been based on the rule of law and the ability to predict the future based on prior agreement. It's been based on the genius of economic reforms innovated out of Edinburgh and Glasgow. And it's been based as well on the ability to keep trade moving. Now, for most of our existence, that trade has been maritime of various description. It's been guaranteed not just by an extraordinary industry of sailors and shipwrights who have created the vehicles of commerce, but also guaranteed by the Royal Navy, who have kept those sea lanes open, those sailors safe, and those goods moving. And the truth is that over the last few years, the nature of that commerce, the nature of that commercial gain and exchange has changed. We've gone from being sea lanes to being e-lanes. We've gone from looking at the Red Ensign as a guarantee of security at sea to GCHQ and the National Cybersecurity Centre being a guarantee of security on the internet and in cyberspace. Now, those changes have been absolutely fundamental. They've enabled us to do things that, frankly, are quite remarkable. If you look at the changes that our country has been through in the last 4 years since COVID struck us, the ways in which so many of our lives have gone online. In fact, even this place went online briefly, though we seem to have forgotten how convenient that was. And so many of us were able to transform the businesses that we were working in from being local or national to global in the way that communication has worked. And now that has been a phenomenal blessing, but none of that has been possible without the dedication and brilliance of some remarkable individuals who have kept us safe. Now, those individuals started off being headquartered solely in Cheltenham, and we know, and those of us who've had the privilege to visit Cheltenham will know that the extraordinary brilliance and genius of some remarkable people has been fantastic, not just for our country, but actually for many partners and allies around the world. What we're seeing today is, though, that it's not just the government that needs to be kept safe. The reality is it's now companies and individuals who guarantee that security in many different ways. And what we're talking about here today, this evening, is how does the wider economy, how is that wider economy defended? Now, that's where I think the government has made, I think, some very important changes, and changes that I hope will be built on in coming years. Because that cybersecurity force that we've created is an absolutely essential part of keeping the UK's commercial interests safe. It is a fundamental building block of our future economy, not just of today. And seeing how that has worked with the National Cybersecurity Centre is absolutely essential. Because the reality is we don't see the economy of Britain guarded simply by the government, and we don't see national security as being limited to the arms of the state. It is true, fundamentally true, that many suppliers to government, many different institutions that connect to government are also important. But more than that, every single part of our lives, every single aspect of our lives is also a part of keeping our country safe. It is certainly true that while the government doesn't provide the food, the supermarkets that feed us every day are part of our national security. While it is true that the government doesn't move the money, the banks that keep us fluid in that sense are absolutely part of our national security. And it's absolutely true, therefore, that all of those capabilities, all of that cyber defense that goes into the wider area, the wider economy, and into our lives keeps us all safe. And sadly, one of the things that has distressed me most in this job is discovering the level of abuse that I'm afraid is now prevalent online. You won't require me to tell you, but we see an explosion in online bullying, we see an explosion in online abuse, and very sadly we've seen an explosion in online harm that has taken not just many young people, but many people from across every walk of life to very dark places, and in some cases, very sadly, actually cost lives. And so the cyber work that we do is not just about protecting the state or the government or even the economy. It's about protecting homes and families across the United Kingdom. And that's why the work that we're doing in the reform of the Computer Misuse Act is so important, because as my honourable friend, the member for Barnsley Central, put it, but also particularly the honourable member for Preston put it, the changes that we've seen online in the last 20, 30 years since that act was passed are phenomenal. It was passed before the internet, before the iPhone, before social media. It is, in a modern sense, historic. It is dated, and it is based on an era when to hold data was to hold it on a solid drive in a computer, not in the ether, not on the cloud. And so the nature of intervention to keep cyber defences alive and to test them was very different, and it was drafted for that era. And that's why the work of Sir Patrick Vallance has been so important, and that's why the way in which he has approached it has been so important. And that's why we've been looking so carefully at what he is recommending and how to get the best answer out. Because the truth is that any decision we make is going to be difficult. It's going to raise questions about the ways in which businesses work and the way in which they partner with others around the world. And when you look at the ransom question that my honourable friend asked about ransomware and the way in which it's changing, I think that's where the direction of this is so important to take, because the counter-ransomware initiative that we led as the United Kingdom, that we changed in various different ways, and the ways in which we've approached it to see and make sure that we are properly structured to get the benefits of it. The reason why I am confident that we're in the right direction on this is because we're actually setting the agenda. And in the last 18 months, since I've had the privilege of being the Security Minister, we have launched at least two, forgive me as I try to remember how many of them are public and how many of them are private, and you'll appreciate that in this job it's probably best to get that distinction right. So I'll say at least two public actions alongside partners on counter-ransomware actions. One, noticeably, about a year ago, was against various Russian targets who had decided that it was in their advantage to try to extort and exploit organisations in the United Kingdom and, in fact, in the United States. And the reactions that we have made, therefore, the way in which we partnered with allies and friends, has actually made sure that we're not just able to defend ourselves, but we're actually able to make sure that we are also making the punishment for the crime. So we are putting sanctions on, we are closing down accounts, and we're making sure that we actually have those resources in partnership with organisations like the FBI to resist those different areas. But this also raises some questions about the state, and this was hinted at, and I'll just go a little bit further into it. Because this isn't just about individual actors, this isn't just about those in the so-called troll farms or the Internet Research Agency, as was so famously used by Russia recently. It's also about states themselves, because we are seeing, very sadly, we are seeing states try to use these forms of exploitations as means of profit. And we've seen one state in particular, North Korea, seeking to quite literally use this as a cash cow, as a way of paying for its nuclear program, for its nuclear weapons program, as a way of extorting money out of individuals around the world in order to advance its own hostile interests around the world. And this is where some of the changes that we've been able to make, in fact, and I pay tribute to him, alongside him and with support from parties on all sides, we've made changes that I think are going to make substantial difference in the years to come. And one of those areas is the National Security Act. Because actually the National Security Act, through the various different elements of cooperation with foreign states, makes criminal actions that formerly would have merely been assisting or would have been hard to define. They may not necessarily have been breaches of the Official Secrets Act. They may not necessarily have been actually empowering or profiting a foreign state in a direct sense that would have been criminal. But the National Security Act, which has been absolutely essential to making sure that espionage is properly punished and that the support of hostile states is now criminalised, has been a very important way in which we have taken this forward. Now, I'm very grateful for the support that he has given. I'm very grateful for the support that others have given, because this has been a really important change in the way in which we have been able to make a difference. Now, we've also seen various different ways in which, I'm afraid, states have used these sort of powers in different ways. We've seen, for example, the various different ways in which Beijing, I'm afraid, has been ordering different threats against us. Now, I won't comment about existing things that are being gossiped about in different places, in main chambers rather than in the Westminster Hall. But I will say that the cyber group, that is state-affiliated, APT 31, has been and consistently remains a threat that has been targeted against the UK. Now, we have seen this again and again, I'm afraid, and we have had to take action that has made sure that we are able to protect ourselves. And this is one of those areas where the work of the National Cybersecurity Centre has been so incredibly important, not just in terms of protecting the state, but in terms of protecting our wider economy. And that's where we have a wider mission. Because the truth is that protecting the wider economy is not just about protecting all of those areas. It's also about protecting families and individuals across our country. And that's where I'm proud of some of the work that we have done alongside businesses. Because alongside businesses, some of which are UK, some of which are international, we've been able to change some of the incentives and some of the pressures on them. And we brought down fraud in the last year, 16%. Now, that is not as far as I'd like it to go, and I'm sure others around in this House will recognise that there is further to go yet. But that is a hell of an achievement by some fantastically dedicated law enforcement professionals and their cyber partners in making sure that homes and families across the United Kingdom are safer. But of course, as we move further online, and if one looks at the National Health Service today and sees the amazing investment in technology and in the changing way in which we're communicating with our doctors, many of us now will know that the NHS app, which has been downloaded, I think I'm right in saying, but I'll have to check this, by about 3/4 of all adults in the United Kingdom, is a fantastic way in which we communicate across the medical professionals. All of this means that we have wider vectors of attack. Now, that has been an enormously important area for us to make sure that we're working together. And that's why, and I will just correct my honourable friend, although the National Security Council may not have a cyber element in that sense, there is a Ministerial Cyber Board which meets on a very similar basis, except it's chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister and brings together departments from across Whitehall. And that is an extraordinarily important area where we set the policy and make sure that it works together. Because there's a huge amount that the UK government is already doing. Now, just to answer a couple of his questions, he did ask about the policy of paying ransomware. Now, this is something that we have set an agenda on, which is that we should not, no public body should be using state money to pay ransomware. We've done this with the National Health Service, we set the agenda there, and we've been very clear to organisations like the British Library that that should not be happening. So that is a policy that we have made clear. But it's also clear that some of these ransomware areas which are being used for profit are also being closed down. And I don't know if the Honourable Member is aware, but the Lockbit sanctions have been incredibly important. In the last few days, we have not just closed down, taken over the Lockbit site, which is a brilliant piece of work by the National Crime Agency and others, including the FBI, but it's also exposed those people behind it. Now that is an extremely important way in which we are taking the fight directly to those criminals who are challenging us and making sure that the National Cybersecurity Force, which is wonderfully homed in Preston, or soon to be, next door, is soon to be, many of them will be homed, I'm sure, though they may work in other parts. Is a fantastically important element in that national defence. And so while once we flew the white ensign to protect sea lanes, today we fly a different sign, which is national cybersecurity signs, and indeed the wider British government protection to protect our e-lanes of communication, which keep us not just safe, but free today. Thank you.
So Mark Hendrick to wind up.
Just waiting for the microphone. Can I thank those who've taken part in the debate, principally from the front benches here today, for their contributions and for their thoughts and deliberations on as to how they see the way forward with this Act. We didn't get a direct response, particularly from the Minister, on whether there would be any attempts to amend the Computer Misuse Act this side of an election, but obviously, as my right honourable friend said, we do look forward to that at some stage in the future. And also the questions that I posed, which I think Hansard have now disposed of, so I couldn't remember them offhand, but the questions I've posed with the Security Minister present are still pending, so I would be hopeful that he could write to me with answers to those questions. And I look forward to hearing from him again. I do feel very strongly about this because apart from British Aerospace or BAE Systems as they are now, and the new cyber centre that's people are working away at, and many of the important educational, technological and industrial developments that are taking place in and around my constituency in Lancashire are very important for jobs, the economy, and obviously are very important in a national context as well, as both or all of the front bench contributors have said, is a key part of keeping Britain safe, keeping our constituents safe, and making sure that we continue to thrive, both in economic terms, but also in political terms and democratic terms. So I thank you, Ms Bardell, for chairing this debate today. I'm very pleased that it's taken place, and hopefully this is a seed for further action in the coming weeks, if not months. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered cybersecurity laws and tackling crime. As many of that opinion say aye, the contrary no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.
The proceeding has ended.